We are always talking technology, even through heat waves. And with us is Matthew Dickerson. How are you, Matt?
You'd think I'd have some sort of technology to keep you down below that ridiculous temperature you're going to get to today, Chris, but I've got no magic solution for you today, I'm sorry.
I've got the Swampy and the split system cranking in my place.
The problem is the old Swampies don't go so well when the humidity starts to get up, so those split systems are needed.
All right, well, our first topic for today is how is the technology industry helping to solve the shortage of seasonal workers, Matt?
Well, we've got someone new called Clive, and not the big Clive that many of us know and have seen around Australia. This is Clive, the fruit-picking robot, and it's about to get to work in the Goulburn Valley to cover the seasonal worker gap. We know the problem that we've got at the moment in Australia with the seasonal workers, a few issues around that, the backpacker reform and visa reforms, but mainly coronavirus has really cut down those numbers. Typically, we'd have about 200,000 seasonal workers coming through Australia to work on various farms, pick fruit, etc. But at the moment, we're down to about 30 or 40,000, so numbers have been reduced quite dramatically. But Clive, which is built by an Australian company, basically will go up and down rows of fruit trees, and it's quite clever. It uses some sensors, it uses some cameras to work out the fruit that's acceptable to pick. Once it works out that it's the right colour, the right size, the right ripeness, looks for any blemishes, it then uses a vacuum to basically suck that apple or pear or stone fruit off the tree. So it's really a bit of a trial. There's two of these robots that are going to start down the Goulburn Valley, and really a trial to see whether or not it is commercially viable to use something like a fruit picking robot instead of some seasonal workers. There's probably some other issues around that, issues about lack of employment then, people missing out on jobs because of robots, which is happening around the world with everything. At the moment, there's some robot ethics, who owns the data, what happens if something goes wrong, who's responsible for that. But really this trial is the first step on something that I can see will basically be the future as we look around farms in maybe 10 years' time. We'll see a lot more of this.
And what does the latest data show about the passwords we used throughout 2020?
It's very sad, Chris. It's very sad.
It is.
I like to get some password tests or comparisons from year to year and see what people are using, but still, the passwords they're using haven't really changed much from last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is still an incredibly popular password. Now, this was taken from a database of 275 billion passwords that have been extracted through various data breaches. So it's not just someone making up these bits of information. So in 2020, the number one password was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as I mentioned. But passwords like password, I love you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 were common on that list, common to 2019. There was a new one that came in the list this year, which was Senha, S-E-N-H-A, which means password in Portuguese. So we really haven't gone far away from that. Picture 1 is another one as well. Picture with the number 1. So maybe that was generated by the fact that some passwords or some organisations make you put something else besides character, alphabet character. So maybe picture 1 was one of those things. But just some of those standard ones that we see, the numbers vary, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, even all ones, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, some of these passwords, and these aren't ones I'm making up, Chris. These are ones extracted from these data breaches. So basically the advice is don't use some of these common passwords. It makes it incredibly easy for someone to hack into any of your information. So try and use ones with upper and lower case, put an other character like an @ sign or an exclamation mark in, use numbers, and most importantly, use words that don't exist. So make up a word that consists of the first letter of your favourite football team and your favourite cricket player or whatever it might be. But when you use words out of a dictionary, then people use dictionaries to basically hack into your system. So it makes it easy for them to use a dictionary attack. So please don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It just makes it too easy for people.
Yeah. And how has your investment portfolio progressed during coronavirus? I must admit, I said to my father just towards the end of March, I said, look, enter the stock market. I'm pretty sure it's bottomed, but he never did. That would have been the ideal time, wouldn't it? Just sort of bottomed towards the end of March.
Yeah, I think you're right. It would have been. Unfortunately, there are a lot of unscrupulous operators who took advantage of the fact that people were trying to get into the stock market, make some investments. And so they came up with some really sophisticated tactics where they were replicating normal fund managers' websites. They were producing glossy brochures, all sorts of things. And what it's resulted at, and this is a study out of the UK, investment scams quadrupled during the pandemic lockdown. And so when people were at their most vulnerable, I suppose, and people needed that money the most, that's when scammers came along and took them for a lot of money. The number of scams, official scams, this isn't the number of people that were scammed, but these were the actual number of investment scams, went from about 300 in a normal year to 1,175. And the amount of money that's been lost by people, and again, this is just in the UK, is pretty scary. And these are people that, it's not like they've made a bad investment. If they wait around long enough, they'll eventually get their money back. These are people that have invested their money and it's gone. £657 million in the last year. And so during the pandemic, it quadrupled. But even over the last year, if you take the whole year as a whole, it's risen by 28%. So just be very careful. Again, it sounds like we're doing public service announcements this morning, Chris. Be very careful with those investments and talk to someone. Make sure that the site you're going to is the real site. Make sure the site name matches up to exactly what it should be. But really, just because the company's got a nice-looking website and a couple of reviews from people they always put on there as high-net-worth investors and maybe a glossy brochure, just be careful. Make sure it is genuine before you go and invest your hard-earned money.
We are talking technology with Matthew Dickerson. And, mate, how can a watch save your life?
Well, it's happened again. We've seen a couple of examples of this, but there was a 25-year-old student who was sitting down just going about his normal day, not really taking much notice, and suddenly his watch gave him an alert. And you can set up watch alerts for your heart rate, for example, to say if your heart rate drops too low or it goes too high. Now, he was sitting there doing not much, and suddenly he noticed his heart rate was at 210 beats per minute, which obviously is very high for most people. Your maximum heart rate is 220 minus your age. So his maximum heart rate was 195. Suddenly it's at 210, and he wasn't out exercising, he wasn't going for a run, he was just sitting there working away, doing some study. So he got to himself to a medical facility pretty quickly, or actually some of his friends took him there, and they found that he had an atrial ablation. And he required an atrial ablation because he had an atrial flutter. So basically his heart was almost in defib or would need to be defibbed. So effectively it was something that if he had left that for too much longer, he might not be with us anymore. So this is the sort of thing that, sure, we can use watches, we can use them to help with our exercise and track how many steps we've done for the day. But with some of these alerts, we can actually save lives with them as well. One of the other great features that we see a lot on watches at the moment is if you experience a certain number of Gs, for example, you fall over, you fall off your push bike, you have a car accident, and then you don't move for a minute, it can be set to automatically ring emergency services. And I'm finding more and more people in the elderly age bracket are using these instead of their emergency pendant, because their emergency pendant isn't much good if they've fallen over and have been knocked out, whereas the watch can take control of that and automatically ring emergency services. So a lot of good uses for a watch. Apparently, Chris, in addition to all these things, some of them do actually tell the time as well.
Fantastic. All right, Matthew, we will leave it there. We will see you on your YouTube channel, Matthew Dickerson, and we'll talk again next week on 2WEB. Thanks, Matt.
Sounds great, Chris. Enjoy the heat out there.